Today in the backstory, this will give any hiker a run for their money. Writer Kevin Fedarko hiked the entire Grand Canyon, nearly 800 miles of it, and it almost killed him.
His new book, A Walk in the Park, details the trek of a lifetime that included bad choices that nearly led to disaster. Kelly Koopmans spoke to Kevin about his wild misadventure.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about this new book and really the adventure behind it. I mean, you're hiking the Grand Canyon end to end, 750 miles. If you were to walk from Seattle, that's like walking, pretty much to Sacramento, which is pretty crazy. Why don't you just talk to us about where the idea for this came from?
It wasn't my idea, actually. It was my good friend and collaborator, Peter McBride, a National Geographic photographer and filmmaker. And he came to me in the summer of 2015 and said, look, I have this really great idea. The two of us are going to strap on 55-pound backpacks and we're going to walk from one end of Grand Canyon National Park to the other. And we're going to do this despite the fact that there is no trail connecting those two things.
Wow. And what was your response? Were you like, this is a great idea?
I probably knew that it was not a great idea. I was dumb enough to allow myself to be convinced to sign on to it. Pete and I have a longstanding relationship, which involves him talking me into some very, very ill-advised schemes. This was the most challenging and the most arduous and in many ways the most painful of them all, however.
Yeah, I can imagine. My sister's a big thru hiker, and I know for her, preparing for a big hike means, you don't just take the toothbrush, but you whittle the toothbrush down to save any ounce you possibly can. It sounds like you guys weren't quite as prepared as that. Talk about this epic fail that really started from the beginning.
I'm embarrassed to say that we did not engage in that kind of preparation, and that our journey really boiled down to hubris, followed by pain, followed by revelation. We didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't prepare adequately. We entered the canyon with insufficient gear, with improper training, and we were very, very thoroughly spanked by the canyon. Had to come out, admit that we had failed, restart the whole journey again. And it was that second part that really opened us up to some of the revelations and the wonders that this landscape contains.
Yeah, you touched on some of the pain there and the big spanking it gave you. What was that physically most difficult part of this journey?
It was just brutal. Physically, you're moving through a world that's a vertical wilderness that is the most shattered and broken landscape we have on the face of the North American continent. It seems designed to resist the idea of human beings moving through it laterally with ease. There are incredible temperature variations. In the summer, it's a furnace, 110, 120 degrees. In the winter, the storms come in and coat the canyon with layers of snow and ice up to 9 to 11 inches thick. Temperatures that go to -5. You have to pour boiling water to get your frozen shoes on your feet in the morning and then allow them to freeze to your feet so you can keep moving through the day.
Wow, that's amazing. And you go through all of that and you come out on the other side. Is it a spiritual experience when you come to that final accomplishment and to really be humbled by Mother Nature?
It's a great question. I don't think of myself as a spiritual question, but as a spiritual person, but there were definitely spiritual dimensions to this. Partly the sheer beauty of the canyon itself, the colors of the walls, the texture of the rock, the amount, the variation of flora and fauna, the sunsets, the stars at night. And more than anything else, I think, something that was not visual but auditory. Perhaps the greatest treasure the canyon contains, maybe the least appreciated and the most fragile, is the silence that comes over the canyon, that blankets you, that creates a kind of crystalline vacuum into which you can plunge and engage in tranquility and meditation and deep spiritual thought. That is the thing that stays with me more than anything else.
That sounds beautiful. Tell us a little bit more about your book and some of the things you want people to walk away with once they read it.
Two things. One is the sense that even though these national parks, and this is the most iconic of them all, Grand Canyon is the crown jewel, that Americans like to think of these places as sacrosanct and inviolable and protected for all time. They are not. They are vulnerable. They need people to defend them, which means that they need people to go into them and fall in love with them. Second thing, Native Americans. These landscapes belong to tribal people long before folks who look or sound like me ever arrived on this landscape. These people are part of the past in these national parks, but also part of the present and the future. Their stories are connected to the land. Their knowledge of the landscape is encoded in their culture, their language, their traditions, and they are an essential part of the story of our national parks.
Well, what an adventure. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.